This
But this,
conference will now be recorded.
okay, there it goes. Um, Today we're going to talk about what you need to do for documentation for home and community-based waiver services. Um, Before we do that, just want to make sure that you all are aware that if you're looking to receive continuing education credit for today's presentation, which is hopefully will be about an hour and a half, you must attend the whole webinar. So if you go off early, we can't give you credit. You must identify yourself on the screen, and if you have more than one person uh, taking the class, we need to know everyone's names so that we can give everyone credit for the class. And you must email to Irene at Bakersfield ARC a brief, and it can be bullet points, doesn't have to be paragraphs. It can be fairly simple, of three things that you learned from this presentation. So that gives us a sort of a documentation, talking about documentation, and we're asking for documentation on what you learned today. So we want to know, and it also, frankly, if you look at learning perspective, if you look at uh, the research that's been done on how we learn, if we have to write things down or remember them after the event for some reason, as a document like we were doing here, it sticks better, uh, and we remember it much better. So it not only is for the documentation that we're doing this, but we're also making it so that the class has more value for you and really is relevant to the work that you do every day. And we ask that if you're going to ask for credit, that you try to submit it within the next 30 days. So that way we can do things timely. We don't 6, 8, 10 months later, somebody coming back saying, hey, I need the licensing is coming out this week. I need to show that I took these courses. And this creates extra work for both you and for us. So please work with us on that and get it in quickly. Um, as Valerie was mentioning right before we got started, there is a program that is available to you through a national corporation called Relias, and they are a basically a video training service. So they bring in experts in many areas, not just developmental disabilities, mental health. I've taken classes from them on occupational safety, on a number of other areas, but specifically, we have identified 31 classes that they offer that could be beneficial to you as a provider of services to persons who have intellectual and developmental disabilities. And the old cliche about there is no free lunch. Well, this is a free lunch. We through the grant that Bakersfield ARC obtained from Current Regional Center and DDS this last year, we bought a number of slots so that people can take the classes. And what that entails is that you contact either Valerie, who's on this webinar right now, or Irene. They will give you a temporary code. You can get in, then you create your own password, and then you can get in, take a look at the menu, decide which courses you want. And the nice thing about these courses are they're self-paced. So you decide when you want to take it. So if you have an hour that you want to work now, and then you're going close it and then come back 3 days from now and finish the class, that you can do. If you, when you get home this evening and you wanted to do some work on your CEUs, you can do it at home in the evening, on weekends. It's You decide when you take the courses. As Valerie was mentioning, this is being done under a grant, and that grant expires on September 30th. We had applied for continuing that into next year, and unfortunately, uh, due to the demand for funding, there are a number of different vendors who were requesting grants under this program. The award that we received for next year does not include continuing of this Relias um, continuing education program. So it will end on September 30th. So if you have an ID and you're getting in and you're taking training, you have to finish it up by the end of September. If you haven't started yet and you want to, get in now, and you can take the classes between now and the end of September at you when you're available to be able to take those classes.
Just
Um,
so, just because of the fact that we are unable to access after September 30th, I'm asking that everybody complete it the week prior, because I am storing everything. So if anyone needs any type of certificates or certificate of completion, I will have them available via emails, and I can just send them right over to you. So at least the week prior would be great. Um, and then that would, I guess, help me to help you guys out with that one.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, so yeah, because once we are no longer subscribing, we lose our access too. So the records about who took what and the credits they got won't be accessible to us. So if we record your credit prior to our completion of the program, then we'll have it. If it's completed after we leave the program, well, which you won't have access to. But if you, but for stuff that you completed or didn't complete beforehand, we can't give you credit for it. So we want to make sure you get not only get these wonderful courses, but also that you get the credit that you deserve for the time that you spend doing this work. Um, Now, coming up in July and August, um, positive purposes, which is another of the grant recipients of home and community-based waiver services through Kern Regional Center, is going to be offering trainings on the whole area of vocational services and how do you move folks towards adults or youngsters leaving public education into adult alternatives. Um, and the importance to this is if you go back and look at the home and community based waiver, rule number one, first rule says that people are given options for community work. So it's important that we make at least aware the folks that we're serving that work is a alternative that they can look at. So whereas in the past we've looked at uh, adult day services, at some pre-vocational stuff, some other type of options. The California in 2012 um, uh, passed a resolution that says that California is an employment first state. So, in theory, Kern Regional Center service coordinators, as a individual starts going into young adulthood, is supposed to be talking to that individual about educational, as they leave the educational system, what work options are available to them. So these are a couple of national experts, one from Wisconsin and one from Massachusetts, who work with the U.S. Department of Labor as contractors through a private company called EconSys. And they are going to be coming out. Well, there's going to be a 1 hour webinar first, which they're going to explain the program and do a little bit of background. And then they're going to give you homework. And then you're going to be coming to these sessions with examples of people you're working with or people who you thought about work and what you think would be a good next step for that individual. So they're going to be excellent trainings. These are, like I say, national experts, and we're bringing them here to Bakersfield in the heat of the summer. So that's a real commitment on their part. So we'd like to have as many people come as possible, and you can attend. You can have as many people from your center as possible. If you're a provider and you want to send more than one person, you can. You just have to register for each and every individual. And there, for vendors, there are two different sessions. One is specifically to for providers who are day program providers, and the other one is for providers who are doing vocational services. If you're providing both types of services, you can attend both. And here is the flyer that is for the one. This is for the day services one, and you can see that it is. Let's see if I can enlarge. Whoops. No, can't. It is well, July 10th at 9 a.m. There is the 1 hour course, and then the in-person courses are going to be on July 22nd, and then on August 19th with a follow-up session on September 10th. So, the two are going to be half day, 3 hours each in July and August with an hour pre-session and an hour post-session. Would encourage you to get involved if you have the availability. Okay. The oops, the National Association of Direct Support Professionals recently did a email blast about their blog that they have. And one of the things that it said in there was behind every word that a DSP writes is the person you are supporting. So when you're writing down something in the record, it's not just for the sake of, I got to put something down on paper. It's that this is about a human being. It's about somebody that we're, have chosen in our profession to support. And how is this documentation that we're writing meaningfully involved with what we're doing with that individual? Documentation is critically important for direct support professionals in the field of IDD for many reasons. Now, let's see if I seem to have misplaced the slide, but that's okay. I do some work for attorneys. I sometimes will do what's called expert witness things. So I will talk in depositions, in court, etc., about what is good practice. What is basically they call it the standard of care in our industry. So what should we be doing in making sure that we're providing the care that the people that we serve need? Now, I've seen situations where an attorney who is bringing a action against the home, let's say, for example, a civil lawsuit, so they're suing a home or a day program, will say something like, well, what's your policy on documentation, or on your ID notes, on your special incidents, on other things that you're doing that really write down what's happening with this individual, and the person who's on the stand will say, well, we document all the things that happen. So then the attorney opens up the record and says, well, on March 7th at 2 o'clock, when uh, did this event happen? And the client trip and fall due to what we're claiming to be your lack of supervision and care and what have you. And the person will say, well, we don't think it was lack of supervision, but yes, he did indeed fall. Well, where is that in the record? Well, we didn't document it. Well, but you just told me a few minutes ago that your policy is that everything gets put into the record, and it's not in the record. So did it happen or did it not happen? And if it did happen, why isn't it in the record? And what, is it that you guys missed about this event, which we believe it should have been properly documented, consistent with your policies and procedures. So it's critical that you are documenting what goes on in your program, in your residence, in the type of services. Accurate documentation allows the team, the multidisciplinary team, when you're sitting down for IPP meetings with your service coordinator, with other members of your staff, to understand the individual's needs, their preferences, their progress, ensuring consistent support regardless of who's providing it and when. So if the documentation is there and I can, I'm, let's say, coming on to do a shift, and this isn't somebody I normally work with. So, Jane is not one of my regular, the persons that I serve. If I have documentation there that I can look at to see what that shares with me a little bit about who Jane is, uh, and what she prefers, what she likes, what her programmatic needs are, that will enhance my ability to serve her, which is what we really are all about. So I can provide meaningful services to her based on knowing a bit about her before I go to see her. If you go to a your doctor's office and your doctor maybe got called away for an emergency, so another medical professional in that practice steps in to see you that day. First thing they're going to do is they're going to look at the record to get an idea of what your needs are. What are your medical concerns? What are your medications? What are your vitals? What's your history? So they have a better understanding of what your medical needs are and how they can support you. So this is why it's so important that when we're doing the work that we do, that we are creating a record. Um, Proper records help monitor changes over time, assisting the effectiveness of interventions and informing necessary supports to plans. The old situation where we see someone that we know and we haven't seen them in 2 or 3 years, and they had a child, and that child was just a little one, and we see them 4 years later, and that child's not such a little one anymore. They've grown up. They've got quite a bit more development and age and language and other skills, and so there is a large development over time, but we don't necessarily see the day to day because we're not with them every day. So in this case, you are with them every day. So in order to be able to see that larger development which took place over time, it's a good thing to have a record. So if I go back and say, wait a minute, 6 months ago, we were working with Jim on some toileting skills. And now, 6 months later, Jim is much more independent in using the restroom based on the intervention that we are working with him from his individual service plan and IPP. I can see that indeed there was progress. And sometimes, we can get a little frustrated because progress is very incremental, and it really depends on the capacities of the individual as to how much progress they make over time. And so having that documentation to show us the progress it reinforces us too. It makes us feel like, okay, we really are having a positive effect on this person's life. And it's also documentation, because one of the things that the Lanterman Act, the law that sets up regional centers, specifically says is that no purchase is to continue unless progress is being made towards meeting the IPP objectives. So when that annual meeting comes along, um, although I've seen many situations where, okay, you've been in this program for 5 years, so let's just keep you going, and no one really necessarily looks at progress. The law does say specifically that we are supposed to be looking at progress. And I think as we move forward and as we get more into fully implementing the home and community-based waiver, as well as other statutory requirements and regulatory requirements, we're going to see more of that. And in the new rate models that are coming out, your rate that you get for your program is basically 90% of what the DDS rate is for been established specific to the type of service that you are doing by service code, by your geographic area. There's a few criteria that they use. The other 10%, the last 10% of your pay is going to be performance based. Now, this year, if you signed up into the system and have signed on to that, you're moving ahead with your the requirements under this new rate reform, you meet the criteria. But starting in next year, in July of 2026, the department is working on specific standards that will say that in order to receive that last 10%, you're going to have to meet performance goals. And those performance goals, the way you would be able to show that is by the documentation that you have done with this particular individual. Hey, when we did the IPP last June, George needed assistance, and the team agreed, and George agreed, and everybody agreed. This was an objective that we'd like to move towards. And now here we are a year later, and here's where we are with that objective. And although we haven't fully met it, we are much further along on obtaining that particular desire of George's, that need. And we're going to continue to work towards full implementation of that over the next year if the team as a whole agrees that that still is a valuable objective, and that George also agrees. And we're going to see where that goes over time. Detailed documentation helps tailor services to meet each person's unique goals and preferences, promoting autonomy and quality of life. So, if we have we've sat down with Cynthia and have discussed with her. Let's say maybe in Cynthia's case, that she happens to be living at home and her family is involved, and she has asked that they be part of her team. And then persons from the regional center, maybe some other agencies that are involved with services for her. And we as a team have decided that these are services that really will meet her unique needs. And now we're writing all of that down and we're developing our plan specific to what the team has said works for her or the direction that she wants to move ahead with and we see as valuable towards her greater community and personal independence and autonomy. Um, Along with that, maintaining accurate records is often legally required and helps demonstrate that supports are delivered appropriately and ethically. Again, regional center can come in and if they do an audit, they can look to see that, okay, wait a minute, the plan says you're supposed to be doing this. Are we really, have you just sort of put that IPP in the file and the file went into the locked cabinet and the next time it gets pulled out is at next year's meeting and we pull out, okay, yeah, this is what we said we were going to do last year. Well, what'd you do? Well, we worked on this over here rather than what we put in the plan. That's not the way it's supposed to work. I've seen it that way sometimes. But what we want is, okay, so we now have this IPP. We have a document that is person-centered. It's what the person wanted, their family, the circle of support, everyone that's been involved with this person has worked towards this. And now we're going to develop specific objectives. The service plan, we as the provider of service are going to say, okay, this is what we're able to work towards here at the XYZ day service program or the vocational provider. And we're going to set specific goals and objectives of how we're going to try to do that. And then we're going to document how we're doing towards that. And also, when I was talking about, documentation, that also means that if there's a special incident, if there's an event, somebody has, let's say, maybe a meltdown one day, and it's specific to, a staff person, maybe came up and put their hand on Eduardo's shoulder, and he's very tactically defensive, and that's probably something that should clearly be avoided because he's made it clear that he'd prefer that he not be touched. And so documenting that in the record so that I, as the next staff person who comes on and is going to be working with Eduardo, would know that very specifically, there are ways that you interact with him, and including like hands on hand or just putting maybe your hand on your shoulder to direct him in a given direction is not, it doesn't work for him. And clearly his plan needs to reflect that. And you as a provider want to make sure that you have that in the record so that it doesn't occur again. And again, if something does happen, having that documentation in there. So if the licensing agency comes out, if the Regional Center Quality Assurance Agency comes out, or if at some point you end up in a litigation where you're being civilly sued, or something happens in your facility with that is so negligent that you're criminally charged. Having that documentation can really make a big difference in terms of how you prevent hopefully that from occurring, or if it does occur, that you have the documentation necessary to really provide for your defense and to really show that what you did was consistent with the standards in the industry and best practice. If any of you are interested, and Valerie, if you want to go ahead and look this up and put it into the chat, the National Association on Direct Support Professionals, NADSP, has a code of ethics, a standard that you as a provider should be doing in the services that you provide. And it's online, it's free of charge. You can get that and have that and work with when you're working with your staff or yourself to make sure that the services that you provide are consistent with those standards. And that really does also help in terms of making sure that you are doing your services ethically and meaningfully and towards the goals and objectives of that individual. And this is something that, I almost sound like a little bit of a broken record here, and I'm going over it again, is that it's the importance of this cannot be understated. Um, and again, documentation also serves as a communication tool among team members, family members, healthcare providers, and others, ensuring everyone is informed and aligned. So, when you're looking at sharing with your own team and with regional center, um, that's one thing. Once you start going outside of your own agency or the purchase of service standards, because specifically in the law it says that you can share information with the regional center if there's a purchase of service. You need to get a consent from the individual. And the Department of Developmental Services just this last month put out a document about sharing information about what you can and cannot share based off of getting a request for information and subpoenas and other things. And so I would advise you to get a hold of that document and review it and see how, and then make sure your staff is aware of, when we're documenting things, who we can share that with and who we can't. The department also just put out something this last week, evidently, at the federal level. The Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services recently gave documentation to the Immigration and Border authorities, the Department of Homeland Security, on files that they had. And there are many people are concerned that this potentially could put some individuals at risk. And so we want to make sure that if we're sharing our documentation, so for example, we notice that an individual has had certain reactions to a given medication. We're a residential provider, and we give this medication in the morning, and he's had some. We've documented that there have been some side effects specific to that medication, and we're going in to see the doctor, and we're bringing in the documentation to show the doctor. We want to make sure that the individual is agrees to releasing that information to the physician. It's in their best interest, but it's still for documentation purposes. I would get something saying, "Well, listen, we're going to the doctor today. Here's something you could see, so I can share the file with Doctor Jones and do that." Um, Proper records can justify the services provided, which is important for funding and audits. In addition, accurate documentation reflects professionalism and accountability. So, for example, if you have an individual in your program that has exhibited some needs for additional supervision or supports, and you want to go back to the regional center and say, okay, uh, Jose has been receiving 1-to-3 ratio supervision, but we think that he specifically needs to have a individual just with him for this period of time during the day program, let's say, for example. Well, the first thing that regional center is going to ask you is, okay, show us why you're requesting that. What has Jose done that reflects additional support needs? And how often, what is the frequency, what have you attempted to do with him to redirect and to try to address the concerns that you're raising, and how is this plan going to work? And sometimes they might ask also for what you're going to do to phase it out over time, but you need to have that documentation to be able to show uh, why you have a concern for maybe Jose's health and safety, or other people in the program's health and safety, or the ability of your program to be able to provide him with the services and supports that he's requested. But because these other situations are creating some challenges to your meaningful program plan, this is what we need so we can effectively do the intervention that we're attempting, uh, that our team has agreed to as the direction for this individual. Okay, moving on. The A competent direct support professional recognizes the vital importance of maintaining accurate and comprehensive records. So you want to talk with your direct support professionals. So if you're a supervisor, or if you're an owner, or you're the manager, you need to stress to the people you work with, hey, you need to maintain and continue to have in the record documentation. And different programs do it differently. Some um, primarily write narratives, and each shift, at the end of the shift, writes a narrative on each individual. Some people have used a checklist system where they write all the objectives that the program's working on, and on a given day, or maybe at a given time during the day, depending on how that checklist is set up, they're putting in, let's say, for example, pluses, minuses, so that people can see whether, or zeros, if maybe nothing was done in regards to that particular objective on that day, so that if somebody were to come in and say, okay, so where are we with working with, Andreas's program plan specific to the objectives, you can pull it out and say, okay, here's the month of June. We've got 4 objectives. Objective one, here's the days that we worked on that, and when days that he was moving in a successful direction, days that he maybe didn't do well with it, or didn't participate in that, or was absent that day, etc. So, and then other people write narratives, and so on June 5th, the group went out to the library, and during the time they were at the library, we worked with Jim on his keeping an appropriate voice level in the set for the setting, and this is what we did. This was how the staff worked with him, and he was successful during this the 2 hours we spent at the library. So that you can see that, okay, we actually had a positive uh, event occur on June 6th. Um, so you want to collect data. I know it's a lot of work. I mean, it's relevant uh, about the individuals, the support, including daily activity, behavioral observations. Again, some people write in their behavioral observations that Mary came into the program today and she seemed upset. In talking with her, she had a disagreement with her roommate this morning. And so we, you know, throughout the day, were a little bit more hands off with her. We gave her a little bit more space in terms of what she could and couldn't do to try to help her with, her mood adjustment for the given program day. And so that gives you the staff people a little bit of understanding about what happened during that day as well. So what I suggest is that you as a provider look at how you want to set up your records. One size does not fit all, just like one IPP does not work for every individual. And if you need technical assistance, talk with your regional center quality assurance specialist. There are consultants that are available that can help you put together. If you are currently looking at some rewrites to your program design, because based off the rate reform, this might be a good time to look at what you're doing with your specific documentation, how you're doing that, and then it's important they also do regular training with the people that you're working with to make sure that they understand. And one of the things too, you want to be must be precise and organized to create a clear record of what's going on. And again, you want to tell people that you want them to report things factually, not that I assume that this was going on, or my hunch was, and that's what you're writing. Well, that's not necessarily an accurate record. That's what you think happened, and it may very well be what happened. But what we want to do is we want to give the facts. George came to the program today, and he was in a you know bad mood. Okay, so what does bad mood mean? It could be a lot of different things. George walked in the door and immediately started swearing at the person at the front desk, and then refused to go to his program area. And the program manager for our program had to sit down with George and spend a half an hour talking with him specific to why he was so upset today. So that's factual. He came in swearing. He refused to go to the program. He needed the intervention of a staff person. You can put down as well what the intervention was. Staff person listened to George for 20 minutes, gave him 3 suggestions on how he can deal with his care provider, or ways he can talk with that individual, what his rights are, and how we can talk with the regional center or with clients' rights advocacy. So you then put down what was the intervention. Okay, reflects individual strengths and preferences, reflects clinical support needs. So you want to make sure you've got, so if they need outside clinical support, if they have, need to take medications, or have other medical interventions that they receive either throughout the day or on a regular basis. The record should sort of reflect that, especially if it impacts on your ability to provide the service. So, for example, if Mary is taking a medication that can affect how she does out in the community on a very hot day, there are some medications that can affect the body's ability to maintain your temperature, they call that thermoregulation, uh, then we want to make sure that that's in the record and that the DSPs know about that, so that maybe on a day when it's 105, Mary isn't you know, involved in that community activity or isn't involved past about 11 or 12 o'clock, depending on what the team looks at, and potentially receiving consultation from medical professionals and then having that in the record to reflect this is what we do under those circumstances would be very helpful, and really a necessity for you to make sure that you're maintaining Mary's health and safety, and really helping also Mary to understand that and see if so that she can be a self advocate in regards to that. Um, and then as you're working with somebody, maybe you identify that we've tried 3 or 4 different ways of addressing this particular goal, and this seems to work, but this other thing doesn't seem to work. So when we intervene by showing uh, Alejandro what that service is or how to do that, and then having him try, and then maybe showing him again and doing a trying. So kind of like a trial and error, and sort of visual seems to work for that individual. We put that in the record then. This technique didn't seem to work. This other, great. We're seeing real progress. And then if there are other people that are involved that also are part of the team for that individual, who do things that aren't necessarily what we're involved with in terms of services and supports we provide, but are providing auxiliary services and supports, or providing things that assist us with the supports that we're providing. We want to have that in the record too. So if the person's involved with other agencies, so if you're a residential provider and they're going to a day program, if you're a day program, but they're also maybe they've gotten a referral to Kern County Behavioral Health, and they're working with them as well. We want that in the record too, so we have a better picture of how we can support this individual. Now, specifically to service plan documentation, the direct support professional and other team members can evaluate the data to identify trends, determine effectiveness of interventions, and to make informed decisions related to support planning. So the more information that we have, the better job we can do. So if we're keeping records on, where Nancy was last January and where she is now on this particular objective, then we can see what's worked, what hasn't worked. Has Nancy now mastered this objective and we can move on to something else? Is Nancy now telling us, no, I no longer want this to be part of my plan, and I want to work on this other objective instead? What are we doing to reflect that in the record, and really talking with the planning team, possibly contacting the regional center and sitting down with the IPP team again and looking at modifying Nancy's program plan to really reflect the new goals and objectives that we have decided for, and that she has decided. That's even more important. She has decided that she would like to see as part of her plan. And we want to make sure that we submit timely. So if we need to have quarterly documentation that is in the record for regional center, for example, we want to make sure that we've done that consistent with the timeframes that we're supposed to do. Not and part of the issue too is with timeliness is that if I'm writing about an event today that happened today, I'm much more likely to remember more detail and to remember the situation more accurately. If a month from now I sit down and I'm writing about what happened in early May, it's not going to have the same accuracy, detail, other things that's the case. Also, if you're if for example you're writing it on the computer and the computer sort of date stamps it, if it ever does become an issue of where you're questioned about it, somebody can say, well, look at we see here that you know Laura fell on March 10th, and you're not writing it up until June 25th. What gives here? And why isn't this? Why wasn't this done? March 10th or shortly thereafter. And so you want to make sure that your documentation is timely. Uh, Best to have your DSPs potentially, if not while they're working with the people directly, maybe at the end of the day. So when the individuals they're working with are now leaving the program for the day, that last uh, half hour, whatever time frame you have after the individuals leave your program, or if you're in a residential facility, maybe at the end of shifts, but at some time, specifically designated for completion of documentation throughout the day. Uh, um, it not only enhances service quality, but also supports accountability. Okay, we've mentioned this already, and I really can't stress this enough. Now, keep in mind, and the presentation today is predominantly on your documentation records for the individuals you serve. But there is another level of documentation that you as a provider need to complete. And that is for Title 17, California Code of Regulations, the regional center requirements of what they would like to see in your facility file, and also licensing. So that when community care licensing comes out and there's certain things that you need to have in your records, your file of who's working in there, the background checks, the other things that are necessity, and also the home and community-based waiver has certain rules and requirements that they would like you to have in your record. So having a facility file, which is separate from the individual that you serve file. So let's say you're a program that serves, let's say, for example, 4 individuals, small home, 4 records for each of the 4 individuals that you serve, but then also a facility file, which has to do with information that's not necessarily involving a particular person's doctor visit per se, but is involving your procedure in regards to taking the individual to the doctor and medication management and documenting what you put in the individual record about that doctor's visit. So you want to make sure that you have both a accurate and up-to-date facility file. And we can talk about that possibly in another webinar. And during this next year, between now and well, December 31st, so the next half a year, the regional center will be putting an emphasis on updating program designs and making sure things are up to date. Uh, One of the other things that some programs have done, and I encourage this, I think it's a good way for additional documentation, is to have a individual handbook. Sometimes I've heard it, I've seen it in the past, when the old nomenclature was used, people called it client handbook. But it basically, when somebody comes into the program, here's basically our program's rules. Here's how we do things. Here's this our day starts at 8:30, goes till 3. During the day, these are the different alternatives that are available to you. This is what we do in regards to if you're not um, happy with a decision made by the DSPs that you're working with or by a manager, or here's how you can appeal. So you have a number of different items in a client handbook. And when somebody new comes into your facility, here's a copy of the client handbook. These are the rules that we sort of follow here and at this program, and this is how we do things. And some people then yearly at the annual meeting either hand it out again or review it briefly with the individual. So that's another option too. So a program uh, documentation, the individual that you serve file that you keep current and up to date and accurate. And then also some people have what they call program. So what are your program philosophies? What are your so if you have a specific standard or a that says that there will be no restraint or no coercion occurring in the program, and that it's specifically prohibited, and that if somebody feels that they're somehow being mistreated, this is a grievance procedure, and that has to be done, similar to a whistleblower policy where there's no retaliation, etc. So you have that as a policy. Then you want to have that in your records as well. So that's documentation that you have as well. And that can also really help you in making sure that your staff and that the individuals that you serve, and if something comes up, so that now licensing is knocking on your door and asking questions about what occurred on a specific day, and you can show them, this is, Gus's file. And this is how we worked with Gus on this particular situation on March 7th. And here's our policy specific to how we deal with this type of situation. So I'm showing you both his record and our agency's record, and so I can document for you, that this was, done correctly, consistent with our rules and regulations, consistent with regional centers, consistent with licensing, consistent with the ethics of our profession, and we've got it all written down right there. Yeah. Um, it's helpful that when when you're writing up things like in the individual's record, that you have down the people who are supporting that individual. So as we really are moving in the direction of greater community, family, other supports that aren't necessarily paid supports, not necessarily purchase of services, uh, that we have down who those are, and where they are. So as we are looking at, Stephanie, and we're looking at who's involved with Stephanie's life, Who are the important people? Who does she want to have at her team meetings, or who comes to visit her, or who does she go out in the community to interact with? What are the things that are important to her? What organizations? What religious organizations does she belong to? Other things that really give us a better understanding of how we can support her. Uh, and who's responsible for monitoring the plan? Um, if you're an agency and you have DSPs and the folks sort of move throughout the agency, and they're working with this DSP part of the day, and then somebody else during another part of the day, and uh, or that you have turnover or other things occurring. You want to have somebody specifically responsible for going back with some frequency and saying, okay, where are we with the plan? Are we moving forward with where we said we wanted to be over time? And we want the plan to be in plain language and understandable to the individual. So we want to make sure that when we're writing up a plan or when we're writing documentation, that if I come along and I'm going to read what you put in there, that I can basically read it. When I worked for one organization in the past, we had a bit of a challenge with the regional center over the issue of I had the supervisorial staff write up the special incidents, the GREs, SIRs, however you want to call it. Um, and one of the things that I found was that sometimes some of the direct support staff professionals, uh, English was not their first language, that maybe they had some uh, learning challenges themselves, and that it might have been difficult to accurately write what occurred. So having them sit down with one of the managers, getting their story, and then having that person write down what they said on the GRE or type it in on the computer and then send it off to a regional center. I found to make better assured the accuracy. Some folks feel that no, the person who actually observed it, who was involved with it, needs to write the report. I'll leave that up to you all to decide how you particularly feel about that, and also to work with your quality assurance person at the regional center and to find out how they feel and what the current policy of the regional center is. This was a number of years ago, and I don't know if currently they allow that or they want the individual to do that themselves. So if you're all thinking about having a specific policy about how that GRE gets written, uh, run that by your coordinator at regional center. You might also want to check with your licensing evaluator as well, because you want to be in good standing with all the other agencies, and you don't want to somehow create something that you didn't need to have happen. So you want to make sure you're doing it the way the reporting agencies want you to do it. I was concerned specifically about making sure that it truly reflected the accuracy of the situation. Managers also sometimes would talk with the individual and say, okay, so what's the who, what, when, where, and why? And they'd make sure that they wrote all of that into the report, and so it was a complete and accurate report. And then sometimes I would review it before it was sent off to the licensing agency and to the regional center as well. And again, making sure that we want to make sure that we have a report that truly reflects what happened. We're not trying to be defensive. We're not trying to cover up. We're not trying to make ourselves look good. What we want to do is we want to report accurately as to what the event that requires this incident report, what occurred. And again, the same thing with if you are looking at documenting for a maybe additional supports for this individual. So you'd like to have uh, additional staffing specific to this individual, or you'd like them to be in a lower ratio or more specialized programming within your what you provide as a for services and supports, having that complete documentation. So possibly getting the record from the individuals who wrote the day to day stuff, but then you write the specific narrative request to the regional center for the additional level of support. And they will require you to provide a fairly sufficient level of documentation as justification for the additional supports. You want to have the person who did the documentation initial or sign it. You got to have include signature of all individuals and providers responsible. Depending on the document, sometimes an ID note can be initialed. A more formal report needs to be signed or electronically signed, depending on how it's done. And again, you as a provider need to look and talk with the people that you work with in regards to what their expectations are in terms of that level of documentation and showing who indeed was the person who observed the situation and wrote the report. Is distributed to the individual and others involved in the plan. So, some people disagree with this. I think it's everyone that's involved with the plan where confidentiality is respected and meets the standard may want to know what occurred in the situation, and so sharing that so that it can be utilized to assist that person in developing plans or implementing plans or adjusting plans related to their objectives. So, and I also, the individuals we serve have a right to their program file. So if somebody asks to see what's in their file or asks for copies of what's in their file, we need to provide it for them. It's their file, and they hold the confidentiality. It's their we're doing this for them, and so ultimately it's theirs. Um, Include purchases, and if they're in self-directed services, which I don't know that anybody on this call is involved with, there are certain other requirements for documentation in self-directed services. But you want to make sure that the your plans reflect the purchase that they're receiving to be in your program. Now, the new IPP that the regional center started implementing in January 1 of 2025 has a section specifically where it delineates all the purchases that are specific to that individual, and it also delineates any services they might be receiving from other agencies. So if they're involved, let's say with the Department of Rehabilitation, receiving services through Department of Health Services or the Human Services, those could be reflected in their plan as well. So people know, well, okay, these are the full array of agencies and providers and supports and services that this individual is receiving. If they're not necessary, John goes occasionally to the Parks and Recs and gets involved in a pickup basketball game. Excuse me. That wouldn't necessarily need to be in there. It might be that John, if you're writing an ID note for the day, you might want John went to the park and played basketball this afternoon. But that's really not a service and support that necessarily needs to be reflected. Um, you need on medication, everybody should have a protocol and a procedure specific to documentation of medications, the name, dosage, route of administration of any medication, dispensing or administering as part of a service, any supplies dispensed as part of a service, i.e., AM medication, C medication administration record. Some people have what's called the MAR, MAR, medication administration record, administration topical antibiotics for abrasion of the knee. You'd want to document that in an ID note or somewhere that you're doing that. Some providers, their primary documentation, and I think I would encourage more than just the basic, but some people look to bubble packs, and they have there because here are John's 4 medications. I have documentation here as to what each of these medications are for, including all the side effects and everything else. I got the thing from the pharmacy that gives me all that information. Have that in the record, and so I can see the administration of the medications and the dosage by the fact that it's in the pack. And this is the 25th, and you can see that 25 of the bubbles have been pushed out, and so that the medication was administered on those 25 days. Other folks want to have a very specific Mars record where you write down, on this date, these are the 4 medications that the individual received. I personally believe that the more is better, and that you want to have, if you are providing medication, that you have documentation specific to, that who administered it and when and how for each individual throughout the day. If you're providing 24-hour a day or shift care for someone, you want to include members responsible for each shift. So for 24-hour care, documentation for every shift of service provided, including the members responsible for the service provided and the person who provided the service. If the person has, let's say, for example, supported living services, and they have staff coming into their apartment, or if you're a residential care provider and you have shift staff coming in, each shift should sign in. At the end of the shift, they make documentation about what occurred during the shift. If you have them doing other documentation throughout the shift, including medication administration, other things that you as an individual provider have delegated for your documentation, you want to have that all in the record. So, and then each shift must document a service note. So depending on how you do that, you want to make sure that, so if I'm coming in on the next shift after your shift, I can see what occurred during your shift and maybe even the shift before that, and have a better idea of what's going on with Brittany. So, and how is she doing today, and what are her concerns and needs. Some people, like as I mentioned earlier, use checklists to document ongoing supports provided during the course of a service provision. Personal care supports range of motion, daily activities. So some people, use something like, for example, develop a Outlook type thing like on Excel. where they develop a sheet, and it's got going across the different items that are uh, need documentation throughout the day, and then they have some sort of a system checks pluses, minuses, zeros, other things, yes, nos, ways of documenting, and then maybe a place where people initial that they were the one who did that particular sign off for that particular service. Outcomes of services. The medical record shall indicate the members' progress in responding to services rendered, including any changes in treatment, uh, alteration of plan or care or diagnosis based on services. So if the person's going to the doctor and you come back home and you have uh, something from the doctor. When I go to my doctor, at the end, he gives me basically a summary of the visit, prints it out and gives it to me. I could then take that back to the facility, put that into the record, and maybe, when I make my notes for that day, went to doctor today to see, summary of visit. This was progress towards, we the most recent test for their A1C, their blood sugar, shows that they, 3 months ago when they came in here, they were at 6.9. Today they're at 6.5. So that there has been progress made in lowering that A1C over the last quarter. And that, and then the following quarter, if it's now, 6.4, well, it's stayed stable over the last quarter, etc. Uh, uh, okay, so the medical record must include, but not is not limited to, the items specified below, unless the listed item is not routinely received or created in connection with a particular service or activity, and is not required to document the reason for performance level and the medical necessity. And all right, so I'm looking at the rest of these slides. I think we're pretty much done for the day. Are any questions? Um, just from a perspective of being a provider, would anybody like to share whether this was helpful in terms of something that you might do a little bit different, or you might want to go back and uh, chat with your staff in regards to specific documentation?
I'm not speaking for everyone, but I can say that I appreciated the fact of stressing the importance of remembering to document and proper documenting of incidences because, like you said, it could put you in a predicament you don't want to be in.
Yeah, very much so. So, you want to be very cognizant of the fact. I mean, if you're involved in a special incident, a GRE type of situation, obviously the first thing that you need to do is make sure that the client's safe, and that if there was some sort of need for professional or medical or first responder or any other type of care that that individual might have required, that takes precedence. So you're not sitting there while the person is having a major series of seizures, working on the documentation. You're interested in making sure that you get the emergency care that they need. And I think, and I don't even think I need to say that because I know that's what you do, but want to make sure that in all of the sort of chaos or activity or emergency demands that are on you immediately. That is, you don't forget to make note of what's occurring, and after, when everything is now safe, the client is in a safe place, is receiving the attention that they need, or it calm down, or that you then take the time to create that record of what occurred. And the sooner you can do that, like I said, the better, because as time goes on, our memories are not as good as they used to be, or your perspective could potentially change, or other things can happen. So, and there are timelines specific to filing GREs with Regional Center, in terms of both contacting them by phone and by following up with your special incident report, also sending that special incident report, the GRE, to community care licensing. You want to make sure that you're in compliance with Title 17 and with Title 22 in regards to that. So, it puts a lot of pressure on you, but I think this is important that you do it right. Any other questions? Concerns anyone has? Okay, well, I thank you for your time today, and I hope this was helpful in terms of your program designs. Look forward to seeing some of you on the call on the 10th for related to the vocational training opportunities that we're going to be having, and then we'll be doing webinars again next month. One of the changes that we will be seeing come October of next year, because of the changes in grant funding, is there will only be one program a month. We're going from the current 1 hour and then a 1.5 hour every month to just a 1 hour. Well, I think maybe one. I'm going to try to do it 1.5 hours a month. I'll see how the funding works out. But there won't be as many of these. But there are going to be some other opportunities that are out there. There's going to be some additional providers that are going to be. So it's not going to be just Bakersfield ARC and Positive Purposes. The regional center has decided to spread the resources that are available across a wider array of services. So there'll be some other options that may be available to you. So stay tuned, and hopefully this will be continuing to meet on these webinars and to work together in the future. Take care. Bye bye.
Thank you, Jeff.